All right, welcome. We are excited to get started. So welcome to our webinar today. Hopefully you can see us okay. I'm Keith Wolf. I'm the Managing Director of Murray Resources. We are a recruiting firm here in Houston, and I'm also the CEO of ResumeSpice, a career coaching and resume writing service. So I am so excited about today's webinar as we're going to address some of the most common questions we're getting from job seekers in this COVID-19 environment. And we know many of you on this call today are finding yourselves in very difficult situations. Maybe you've recently been laid off, maybe you're job searching before COVID-19 even started, or maybe you're just concerned that your job may be in jeopardy at some point. So what we're hoping to do on this call is to give you real practical advice that will serve you well as you navigate your job search. And let me just say this, we work with job seekers every day in every type of environment, and they're often in very difficult situations, even without a pandemic. And then they're searching and they get that job and it all turns around. And that'll happen for you too. So just don't give up hope and keep on going. Joining me on this webinar are Elizabeth Araya and Jessica Richardson. Now, Elizabeth is a search director with Murray Resources. She is a superstar recruiter. She's part of our professional division where we place candidates in accounting, finance, sales, marketing, HR, customer service, and administrative roles. And we also have a technical and light industrial division. And on the ResumeSpice side, we have Jessica Richardson, who is a phenomenal career coach and resume writer. And she works with executives at every level, from entry level to the executive level. Now, both of these ladies have won the highest honor at our company, which is Winner's Circle. And they've done it multiple times. And to get that honor, you have to do really great work with a lot of job seekers. So you will be in great hands today, and we're lucky to have them. So thank you, ladies, for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Excited to be here.
All right. Well, before we get started, let me just go over a couple of housekeeping items. So we're going to try our best to keep this at 60 minutes. We have a lot of content. If we go past 1 p.m. Central, please know you can drop off at any time. That's okay. We are going to be recording this webinar. So we will send out the recording, and in case you miss anything, you'll be able to rewatch it. And we're going to be sharing our perspective and what we're seeing. So we're all coming to this webinar from different perspectives, different points in our careers, different experiences, and you may disagree with some of our advice, and that's okay. We're going to give you our thoughts based on what we're seeing working with job seekers, hiring managers, and HR professionals every day. And this is going to be a Q&A format. So I'm going to do the easy part. I'm going to ask the questions, and Jessica and Elizabeth are going to give their responses from both a recruiter standpoint and a career coach standpoint. And you can submit additional questions during the webinar. We're going to do our very best to get to as many as we can. We are going to try to answer those that really relate to the most possible people, so the most possible people can benefit from this webinar. And all 500 plus people, we have over 500 people in this webinar, everybody is on mute. So do not worry about sound in the background. We cannot hear you, okay? We just wanna make sure we can hear Jessica and Elizabeth's responses. And lastly, we will be sharing the slides from this webinar with everyone who registered. So with that, are you ready to go, Elizabeth and Jessica?
We're ready.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, first, a little bit of good news. So there's a lot of news circulating and not all of it has been good. So we just want to give some good information, some good positive data that we're seeing. So this is something that I posted on LinkedIn a few days ago, and to just give people some insight into job orders that we're seeing from our clients. So the week of March 15th, we saw a drop pretty much overnight of 55% in our new job orders for that week. It sort of reminded me of 9/11 around that time, or for folks who remember Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns, it just seemed like the world was stopping. There was nothing going on. And it sort of got worse for a couple of weeks. I'm sure you all have lived through this. It got as bad for us as April 5th, that week, it was down to 8% of our normal job orders coming in. But then it started to tick back up. So April 12th, it was up to 10%, April 19th, a little bit more. And it got up to 30% on April 26th. And the good news is, so far this week, we're up further. We're probably going to end this week 35 to 40% of what a normal job order week would be before the pandemic. And so that's the good news. It's not where it's going to be, but it's getting there. Okay. So with that, let's get into the questions. And we're going to start with Jessica on this one. Oh, actually, we're going to start with Elizabeth on this one. Is it better to wait the pandemic out or to start a job search now? So what's your perspective, Elizabeth?
Definitely start now. You want to start getting your name in front of companies that are hiring or ramping up, companies and recruiting firms. Recruiters now more than ever are in a really unique position because, like Keith mentioned in the previous slide, we had most of our job searches just completely halted. And so now we are pipelining. We're getting ready for what inevitably is going to come back. We're going to have a surge of positions. And so we're starting to make sure that we've got a strong pipeline of all of the candidates that we're looking for: administrative, human resources, sales. So you want to start registering with recruiting firms, getting your name in front of those companies, getting your resume and LinkedIn profile ready to go, making sure those match up. Scrubbing your social media. So make sure that anything you wouldn't want your grandma to see is not in the forefront of your Facebook account, your Twitter account. Recruiters are checking social media now. Employers, hiring managers, that's one of the first things they go to, and start reaching out and building relationships. So definitely start that job search now.
All right, great. Okay, so thanks for that, Elizabeth. And let's get into a little bit more detail from both Elizabeth and Jessica on what folks can do. So what are some strategies that job seekers can take action on right now to help them land a job?
Well, first of all, you'd be amazed at how many people I work with who, from job seeker perspective, who haven't updated their LinkedIn. You know, you go to look at it and it obviously is months or years out of date. It may not even include the most recent role. So the first thing you need to do is make sure your resume and your LinkedIn are updated. Really, that's a great practice anytime, but especially now because you don't know when you're going to get that email. And sometimes we get asked by clients, potential clients, hey, can we get something ready for submission tomorrow? And that's something that needs to be done thoughtfully and weeks in advance. So now is a great time to start on that. Also, make sure the titles, the employers, and the dates on your LinkedIn and resume match, because a lot of times what happens is completely inadvertent, but when you're putting all that together in your LinkedIn, you're just kind of guesstimating. But if your dates are off and off significantly, and sometimes we see them off by months or even years, that can affect your chances of getting an interview because it raises questions and red flags. So you want to avoid that. Also, make sure your resume includes the impact of your role, not just what you do, but what it enabled for the division, the company, your department, whatever it is that made it better when you left than when you were there. Leadership examples, so that may be how many people you led and what they did and what their titles were. If you don't have direct oversight, leadership can be shown by things about leading projects where you might manage the workflow of a person to make sure it's delivered correctly. And then also including those specific measures of success. How can you show that it was effective? What, percent of improvement, percent of revenue growth, whatever it is that factually shows how what you did had a long-lasting contribution. Then also reach out to those preferred employers. And when we say preferred employers, that would be like if you have a dream of working for Disney, don't just rely on an applicant tracking system. Find somebody at Disney that you'd like to work for in that type of role, that supervises the type of role you'd like to work for, and reach out to them. Studies are showing that only about 16% of candidates do that, and it's highly underutilized because the best way to make sure that a hiring manager sees your resume and wants to talk to you is to reach out directly to that hiring manager. Then apply to roles posted in the last few days, especially now. Now, that's kind of a good rule of thumb because the earlier candidates tend to get the best preference or the best chance of actually getting the interview and getting the offer. But right now, especially those older roles, you don't know if they may be defunct, and somebody just may not have taken them down. So the ones that have been posted in the last few days, those are the ones that have the best chance of being open and active roles. But don't feel afraid or scared of contacting somebody at the company to make sure the role is active. They get those kind of requests and emails and outreach pretty regularly, and they're going to be happy to say, hey, that role is still active and we're still searching for it, or we're not currently hiring. And then finally, reach out to your network connections and let them know you're looking. So the first thing that happens a lot of times is we don't have a job or we're looking for a job, and we'll reach out to recruiters and hiring managers, but we forget to reach out to people that are most invested in our success, and that's our network that we have built. So tell your friends, tell your former colleagues, say, hey, I'm looking, because they may know of an opportunity that you wouldn't even get through a job board, or that can get you past the initial application stage and straight into an interview stage.
Great information. Thanks, Jessica. Just to touch on or emphasize one of the points in terms of making an impact and being specific about the measures of success. So just think about, how have you driven revenue or how have you saved the company money? I mean, those are really the two ways that you can drive that impact and show that on your resume. And for some roles, an executive role or a sales role, it's pretty obvious, but almost any role, and I'd argue any role, you're doing one of those two things. I mean, if you're in an administrative role and you came up with a new filing system to save people time, how much money did that translate into? And so just think a little bit out of the box with your role and try to come up with as many different ways that you save the company money or you drove revenue. All right, let's get Elizabeth's take on this.
Sure. So very similar to that of Jessica's, a couple of the more unique things from the recruiter standpoint, in addition to making sure that your resume and LinkedIn profile are tightened up, clear out your voicemail. I know that seems pretty simple, but I have been calling several candidates a day and have been getting, your voicemail box is full. I am typically following up with an email and a text message, but you want to make sure that you're that candidate who has that clear voicemail. Clear out your voicemail. Now more than ever, going back to tightening your resume, we're all able to kind of add remote keywords to that resume. So anything that you're doing remotely now, working from home, you're running a meeting with 15 people via Zoom, you want to add that to your resume, because that's going to start coming into effect as we start to see more companies kind of shift to working from home. Register with recruiting firms, more than one. As much as I wish that Murray Resources had every requisition in Houston, we don't. So you want to make sure that you've got lots of eyes and ears looking, keeping an eye out for you. Make sure to keep in touch with your recruiter. Email once every 1 to 2 weeks. A check-in email is just fine. Hey, Elizabeth, just wanted to let you know I'm still on the market. Keep an eye on the website, specifically for us, and just keep in touch with your recruiter. Set up a job searching system that is not only efficient, but keeps you positive. Searching for a job is stressful and it's hard. And add a pandemic to that, it just make sure to give yourself some grace. Set some daily and weekly goals. Those daily goals can be as simple as, I'm going to send 3 resumes today. And as you're kind of thinking about being on the job search right now, you really have time for reflection. What kind of company do I want to work for? Think about company type, industry, culture. The internet now, Glassdoor, it really allows you to kind of go on and see what different companies offer in terms of culture and all of that good value. So you definitely want to make sure you're doing that as well.
Perfect. Okay, let me answer just a couple of quick questions. Those are great responses. Thank you both. We're just getting a couple questions I think we can answer pretty quickly. So, is it better to include a LinkedIn profile along with your resume when applying for a position? I would say definitely. If you can include that, the more ways that you can get in front of somebody, the better. Mm-hmm. And we're going to get into resumes specifically in a little bit, but we also recommend that you put the LinkedIn profile link on your resume. So put that at the top as well.
Absolutely.
Recruiters love to look at LinkedIn, hiring managers. I mean, that's where they go. Another person asked, when registering with recruiting firms, who would we suggest that they register with? What I would do is go to you can just simply put Houston staffing, Houston recruiting, or whatever city you're in Google, look at who comes up, and then look at the kind of jobs that they work on. Mm-hmm. And then go to those recruiters' LinkedIn profiles and see, mm-hmm. a lot of times they'll put on their profile the types of jobs that they're specifically working on. So you really want to be targeted. You're going to get pretty frustrated if you're really trying to target the wrong recruiting firm or the wrong individuals at the recruiting firm. If you look at our firm ourselves, we've got a lot of recruiters and they all have their specialties. So make sure you're sort of targeting the right person at the right recruiting firm and you'll have more success.
And Keith, I think we have a list on our ResumeSpice site of recruiting firms, don't we?
We sure do. So yeah, on the ResumeSpice website, we've got a list of recruiting firms by specialty and also by location throughout the US. So thanks for bringing that up, Jessica. Appreciate it. All right. So yeah, Elizabeth, is networking worth the effort right now?
Absolutely. And what we're doing right now is networking. As a panelist, I can see people introducing themselves to each other. I mean, this is a great way to network. And really, even during a non-pandemic, networking is always worth it. In a recent market study, 25% of the candidates said personal referrals were their #1 source for job hunting. In a conversation I had with Jessica, she mentioned that a lot of her positions she's gotten have been through personal referrals or connections that she's had. So we're all kind of going through this shared trauma right now. So really any connection that we make during this time can be especially strong and provide shared value for, the years to come. And, now more than ever, we're really all in this together. I know the three of us on the call, and I'm sure many out there have young children that we kind of had to wrangle away for this. And so, we're all working and schooling from home. And so it kind of gives you a chance to network on a more personal level. I had a call with a client a couple of weeks ago, and she was having to apologize every 5 minutes for her dog and her 3-year-old. And I was like, well, I've got my 4-year-old right here. So we're in this together. And in some way, it kind of, opened up that conversation to getting to know each other on a more personal level. So this is really the time to be networking.
Great. Thank you. And this gets a little bit specific, but we had this question come up and I thought it was interesting. Is it better to relocate for position if somebody has that opportunity, or should they wait for the lockdown to be over?
That's a really good question. The short answer is it really depends on your situation. My recommendation that I've been giving to the job seekers and candidates that I'm talking to is, don't make this decision based on fear. We're going to get past this pandemic. It's going to be tough, but we're going to get to the other side of it. So what you really have to think about is, can you imagine yourself in this role and that location geographically for the next 3 to 5 years? You want to make sure that, while recruiters and hiring managers are going to be understanding of tenure during this particular time, March 2020 to the end of 2020, you still want to think about your resume and what that tenure is going to look like. So I wouldn't move your entire family to go somewhere for a year to then only come back a year later. Remember that recruiters, we tend to favor candidates who live in the area only because a lot of our clients do move very quickly. By the time they're reaching out to us, it's because they're ready to hire. And so we submit a candidate on Monday, I get an email on Tuesday saying, great, can he come in on Thursday? That's really hard for out-of-state candidates to be able to kind of keep up with that timeline. And so with that being said, use your new location on your resume. A tip that Jessica gave me that I thought was fantastic was, let's say you want to move to Houston because you want to be closer to family. Your mom lives in Houston. Put your mom's address as the resume so that when you're having to fill out applications, you've got a real address that you can put in there. And, whenever possible, when you're thinking about relocating, reach out directly to the hiring manager because they'll give you a better idea of timeline and all that good stuff.
Perfect. Great info. Thank you. All right. I know people are in this situation. We're getting this question a lot. I was just laid off. How do I explain that in my resume? Jessica.
Throughout my time with ResumeSpice and working with job seekers, this is one of the biggest concerns that they have. And the interesting thing is, it's one of the things that should be of least concern, because layoffs happen. They happen cyclically, especially here in Houston. They happen pretty regularly with the oil and gas cycles because we're such an oil and gas economy. So they just happen. All you have to do is put a notation on your resume that says something like role ended due to department or company-wide layoff. Very small. It doesn't even have to be anything more than a brief mention. And as you see on there, I had similar to 2001, 2002. So in 2001, we had post 9/11. In 2018, we had post Harvey. We have the pandemic and post pandemic, and then you have regular companies that through no fault of anybody's other than it just doesn't work out, they wind up having to have layoffs. It can even happen regularly. I have clients that work in oil and gas that have been laid off 3 or 4 times, and they're still great candidates and they get jobs because what's important to show is what you've done during the time that you were at the company. And if you can show that and you can keep your network strong, then that's nothing to have to overcome. It's just a fact of your career. So it's nothing to be embarrassed about or feel like you need to overcome.
Yeah, 2020 is just going to be one of those years. If it's on your resume that you're laid off, anybody who lived through this will understand. It is nothing that I would spend a lot of time at all worrying about. All right, so how do I switch industries to one that is hiring right now? Elizabeth, how would you respond to this?
Sure. Switching industries is difficult, Keith, even during a non-pandemic. So the biggest recommendation I would give when someone is ready to switch industries, make a career transition, they've grown their career in one area, is just to be open-minded. You know, if you've grown your career all the way up here, but you're thinking, I'm going to use teaching and HR as an example. I have a lot of educators and teachers that reach out and say, you know, I've been teaching for the last 10 years. I'd like to move into HR. The conversation I always have to have with them is, okay, you know, I know you have those strong transferable skills. You've been with your school for 10 years. Your tenure is fantastic. However, you are going to have to take a step back in terms of position and salary. So you've got to be open to being entry level in the new role or industry. And so as you're doing that, maybe seek out companies that have strong training or development programs. And just remember, especially with recruiting firms, as much as we want to be able to tell a client, you know, she's got great transferable skills, she was with her school for 10 years, when companies reach out to us, they're giving us, you know, they're saying we need an HR generalist with 5 to 7 years of experience. And so it's hard for us to say, well, here's a fantastic teacher. Whereas if you are open to starting somewhere, you know, as an HR coordinator and working your way up, then it just kind of opens your chances a little bit more. So just be open-minded and flexible when you're ready to make that sort of career transition.
Got it. Let me answer just a couple of questions that we're getting here, and we're getting a lot of questions. So we're going to try to get to as many of these as we can. One question was, how can we tell if listings out there are just pipelining or if there's a valid job that they're really hiring for right now? So when we say pipelining, we're pipelining for roles that we get a lot, that they're very frequent, right? So recruiters aren't trying to use their time just interviewing people for the sake of interviewing. If they're bringing you in, if they're having an interview in this day and age, if they're Zooming with you, that's because there is a role that you are very qualified for that we get a lot of, right? Mm-hmm. So think about it that way. And honest recruiters, which, you know, most of them will tell you that I don't have a role for you right now, but this is a role that I get a lot of, and we'll keep you in mind. And yeah, so just keep that in mind as you're thinking about working with recruiters. Let me see if I can answer another one real quick. So is social media playing a factor in landing a job? Will you be screening candidates socially through social media? All the time. I would say your social media, your profile is so important. I mean, LinkedIn is a must-have. If you don't have LinkedIn, if your LinkedIn is not up to date, you're really doing yourself a disservice. And, you know, this is one of those points that, you know, it's tough to tell candidates this because we're all human beings and we all live different lives outside of work, and a lot of people are on Facebook or whatever your social media may be. However you present yourself on Facebook, just make sure you're okay with a recruiter or HR manager seeing that. Okay. People get screened out all the time because of some silly thing they did on social media. I think most people know this at this point, but I think it's worth bringing up because we still see it a lot. All right. So let's get back to the slides and we'll come back to some questions in a little bit. All right. So Jessica, your take on the same question. How do I switch industries?
So this is pretty commonly a common issue faced even not during the middle of COVID and this pandemic, but especially so now. So a lot of times when job seekers look out, it's this wide world of job postings. And so when you're trying to transition, you're thinking, oh my goodness, I don't even know. And I hear that all the time. I don't even know where to start. And the easiest answer is to start close to your wheelhouse, start to where you are. So instead of trying to think, oh, what could I do? Think, what do I do? And what have I done? What am I doing on a daily basis that I love to do? And then look for roles that are similar, that have similar titles and similar job descriptions, even in similar industries. So if you're in one type of manufacturing, you might could switch to a different industry that has a similar manufacturing process, or sales is sales, whether you're selling, technology or whether you're selling automobiles. Sometimes there's cross between there for the people who sell technology to automotive manufacturers. So look at ways that you could come in with a unique skill set that might not be direct, but would actually be competitive. And so read the job descriptions, think about how you could add value in that role into those type of organizations. Look for your transferable skills. So whether that's, the relationship development, business development, and what it would take, what is the gap between immediately hitting the ground running in those roles and what you would need to do to ramp up to that type of role. And if it's a low bar for entry, those are the type of roles that you could really pretty easily move into. And then think about what excites you about those opportunities. So if it's just the fact that there's a paycheck, that excites everybody. We all want to be paid and pay well for what we do. So so that's not a good reason to apply to a role. I mean, other than just if you have to put food on your table, you have to put food on your table. But as far as these are the ideal next roles that you can be in for the next 3 to 5 years, look for the ones that really interest you, that you think, ooh, this is really close to what I do. I love it. I could do this, tomorrow and really enjoy it for the next few years. And I'm excited about the opportunity to transition into this type of role. Those are the ones you want to focus on. And then this is also where a cover letter really comes into play. So, a well-written cover letter will never hurt you. It can help you. But it can actually mean the difference between getting an interview and not in this type of situation, because you need to explain why you're a good fit for these roles and why you're enthusiastic about them. And if you can kind of do those couple of things, show the good fit, why you're enthusiastic about them, and why and show some of those transferable skills, then you're much more likely to get an interview. And
Great.
Use LinkedIn. Use LinkedIn to find people for those.
And we're getting some similar themes on the questions, and just to let you know, so that the ATS black hole, as one person called it, so applicant tracking systems, we're going to talk about that in just a minute, as well as if you're a mature candidate, older candidate, seasoned candidate, all those different terms, some approaches there. So just hang with us. We're going to get to a lot of these questions throughout the presentation. And here we go. Here's the ATS question.
Perfect timing.
So how do I avoid getting rejected by those auto resume screeners, ATS programs, whatever we want to call them?
Yes, ATS, the dreaded applicant tracking system, even for recruiters, because recruiters have to also submit into applicant tracking systems depending on the company size or the company we're working with. So they're not going away. Don't overthink it. Keywords, my biggest recommendation, because those apple to apple matches are the ones that have advantage. And keywords really kind of taking out the ATS, just keywords in general, because as a recruiter, when I'm searching keywords. So, I have a client reaches out, they need an office manager to have strong QuickBooks. Great. That's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to look for a QuickBooks office manager. And so the ATS is doing the same thing when they're kind of parsing through the different resumes. They're searching for those keywords, technology requirements. So really make sure you're putting that into your resume. As much as you can, try to reach out to a human being. I know that's difficult. I think this is one place where working it with a recruiter, it really works to your advantage. The way that I like to describe myself to the candidates I'm working with is I'm your advocate. I'm right next to you in this. And the difference between you filling out all of your information on an ATS and me filling out all of your information on ATS is I've got, more often than not, a little blurb section where I can put notes in about your resume. So not only am I submitting your resume, I'm also submitting 5 to 7 bullet points about why I think you fit everything they're looking for, in terms of experience and what you've done, your duties and responsibilities, who you are as a person. And so I think that's really when you want to kind of use recruiters to your advantage. Or go on LinkedIn and you can see a lot of the times the hiring manager is posted there. And there are some really great add-ons that you can add from Google Chrome to find email addresses to reach out to hiring managers directly. So just get creative. The internet really gives you the option to do that now.
Yeah, and just to speak to ATS just for a minute in terms of it's not going away. I mean, when Murray Resources was started, ATSs didn't exist. 30 years ago, they didn't exist. And then it was just the large Fortune 500 companies, and then went downstream to smaller companies. And now companies as small as 5, 10 people could use them. I mean, it's just the fact of the matter. So don't get frustrated by it. There is a website, for those of you who don't know, jobscan.com. It's they give, I don't know how many, but maybe 5 or 10 free matches. So you can put in the job description of the role you're looking for and your resume and see how closely they match. Essentially what the software is doing, it's a little bit more complicated, but they're just matching keywords. I mean, that's really what they're doing. But you do want to be careful. I mean, there's an art to it. You don't want to, a human being is still going to look at this document. So you don't want to keyword stuff to the point that it looks ridiculous, like it was made for a computer. So you do have to balance those two things.
Absolutely.
Right. Yes.
Okay. So with companies shifting to online interviewing, this was already happening. I mean, there are plenty of companies that were already using and relying on online interviewing, sometimes in place of a phone screen, sometimes in place of an in-person interview, but it's just grown with the pandemic right now, and lots of folks are using Zoom and other software. So what are some video interviewing tips that we can give folks, Elizabeth?
Sure. Dress professionally. Get ready in the morning or in the afternoon as if though you were going to get in your car to drive to that interview. So you want to, your makeup, your hair, put cologne on, perfume if it makes you feel good, because it's a confidence booster. Wear pants, not kidding. Don't do pajama pants. You want to just feel like you're in the interview. Make sure you're in a room that's clean, quiet. You're in a place that there are not a lot of distractions, a background that's not dark, busy. Lighting is key. We had a prep call before this call. I had my blinds open and Keith was like, you're bleeding into the sun. So, there's some adjustment to be done there. So with that being said, we had a prep call before this call to make sure that y'all would be able to see us clearly. Do that as well. See if your mom can jump on. Hey mom, can you jump on Zoom with me really quick on the other side so you can tell me if I should, situate my iPad this way? How does the lighting look? Practice there. Have your resume in front of you, have a notepad and a pen in front of you so that you can take notes. If you can join the call early, expect technology issues as great as it is. I've had a lot of interviews in the last couple of weeks between clients and candidates where Zoom hasn't worked, and those really resourceful candidates have found the phone number of the hiring manager and have been able to call and say, where can I call you now? Be expressive, more expressive than you probably normally would be, just because this is a different sort of interviewing, and they're not able to kind of read your entire body language. They've only got from the neck up. So show your enthusiasm and just relax, have a conversation about the job. Remember that you're not interviewing them, they're interviewing you. It goes both ways. So you want to make sure that they're the right fit for you too.
That's great. Those are great tips. I think lighting is just one of the things that people sort of overlook. Yeah. Right. So just make sure the light is in front of you. In this case, I don't have much control over it. It's behind me, but when you can, make sure it's in front of you. I'm going to put you on the spot, Elizabeth, here. We're getting a question. And it's, if I'm going to reach out to a recruiter, what is the best way to increase my odds of getting a response? I know you get flooded. Your inbox is flooded, text message, your voicemail, you get a lot of calls, you get a lot of applicants. You're trying your best to get through everybody. What is the best way somebody can reach out to you to optimize their chances of getting a response?
The voicemail, follow it up with an email. A lot of firms now, our number is connected to texting capabilities. Shoot our mainline a text. Something that I appreciate is when I'm checking my voicemails and I see that I get an email pop up. Hi, Elizabeth, this is Jessica. I just left you a voicemail. So that follow-up really shows me, oh, this is someone that I want to work with. So, if you're not hearing back from the initial voicemail, send the follow-up email. And, if you can just highlight it, in the initial email, your background and what you're looking for, so that if I'm not the right person that you need to be speaking with, this kind of goes back to making sure that you're reaching out to the proper recruiter. I have a lot of candidates who just look up recruiter, I pop up Murray Resources, they're engineers. I don't work with engineers as much as I wish I did. That's way over my head. But if I see they're in engineering, great, I'm going to think, oh, I'm going to send them to Robert, who is our fabulous engineering recruiter. And so just make sure you put what sort of job you're looking for as well, so that it's either me or I can get you to the right person. But I would say follow up.
All right, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so what are some tips for overcoming the overqualification concern? So we get this a lot. Jessica, what would your advice be?
Well, I can tell you from a hiring manager's perspective, back when I used to recruit and when I used to hire, when I'm looking for a job, sometimes it depends on the type of job. So some jobs have this nice growth path and you put them in and they're tracked for this. And then some jobs are just jobs. So there's some jobs that are entry level or early level, and they don't really have this big developed growth path. So when you have, and also when I place somebody for a job, I want them to stay in it for a while. So while they ask you, where do you see yourself in 5 years and things like that, as an employer, when I place somebody in a job, I want them to stay in it for the next couple of years, because hiring and recruiting and interviewing takes a lot of time and effort and money. So employers are typically concerned if they hire a much more qualified candidate than the role calls for, that they won't be long-term satisfied and they will leave. And sometimes that's the case. If you're trying to get your foot in if you're a 15-year professional and you're trying to get your foot in at an entry-level role, it's not a match. I mean, you're not going to get in through the applicant tracking system. That said, there's some good reasons for that. I've worked with job seekers who have held higher level roles, but they're tired of the stress of it. They're tired of the hours of it. And they really just want to take a couple steps back, because they like the hands-on work and they want to do that for the next 10 years, because sometimes they're seasoned, or they just got in more than they want to do and their life has changed and they need a different type of role and they're ready to commit to that type of role. So you need to actually reach out to somebody directly. And yes, there's a theme there, and that's because it really is something that can propel your chances of getting in that interviewing chair. And it's also where a great cover letter can help. You know, knowing why you want to stay in the role for the next 3 years, and if you'd be comfortable staying in that role for the next 3 years as you develop and grow within a company, is something you need to determine before you move forward with that, to overcome the overqualification concern. And then don't feature, you know, if you have these huge level achievements that aren't necessarily for that role, feature more of the achievements that would be on par or would show your commitment to working within a company versus leading a company. And like I said, reach out directly to somebody about that.
Yeah, and we had a question come through sort of on this theme of tailoring your resume. So if we're tailoring our resume for different types of positions, do employers get confused if your LinkedIn profile remains the same? So let me just address that. I mean, it shouldn't look like a different person. It shouldn't look like a completely different candidate. Don't think of it as a complete overhaul every time you're tailoring your resume. You're just switching up some of the accomplishments, some of the keywords to that type of role. So, you know, what some candidates do, which I think is great, is to have a master resume. And let's say under a role that you've been in for 5 years, you may have 15 to 20 different things that you've done. Well, not all of those, first of all, that's a lot of information for a resume. It shouldn't all go on your resume. And not all those 15 to 20 things apply to every job. Pick or choose the 6 to 8 things that may. And it's still the same position, you're still in the same role, and there's going to be some overlap there, but it shouldn't look like a different person. It's not completely different. It's just tailored.
Sure. And from a coaching perspective, think about who you are as a professional. If you had to highlight 3 things where you really add value to a company, whether you're a problem solver or you are a process improver, or you are a really good at getting teams to collaborate towards a common goal, think about the ways that you would position yourself for any job that make you an asset to any job. And really highlight those themes throughout your LinkedIn and your resume with some actual examples. And then all of a sudden, no matter what you're applying for, you're going to maximize those aspects no matter what you go for. And that way it shows a common thread as you shift towards different roles.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So we have received this question. It may be the most common question that we got. I asked folks to submit a question if they wanted to before they joined when they're registering for the webinar. Can you offer advice for those who may be somewhat older and in the market looking for a job? So Jessica, what advice would you give somebody who's on the more mature side?
Several things. If you've been in the same role doing the same type of, so you've been a process engineer and you've been a process engineer or senior process engineer for 20 years, you really only need to feature the past 10 to 15 years of experience. And that's that's standard for a resume. It's been standard for a resume for a very long time, decades. That's been the standard. So that somewhat levels the playing field right there, is that you don't have to feature 25 years. However, you may want to include that older experience. If you started out at Dell or IBM or Cargill or one of the really big companies and have a nice progression of growth through those 10 years where you did some amazing things, that could position you uniquely for a job where somebody with only 10 years of experience might not be able to contribute at that. So the key is to kind of look and determine whether your older experience is relevant and competitive. And if it is, absolutely don't be afraid to include it. But you don't want to include it if it's basically the same over and over. And what I've kind of seen throughout the gamut, I've worked with executive and seasoned professionals from 25 years to 30 years of experience and more. some of them are still highly competitive and sought after and really kind of are almost writing their own ticket. And the reason is they have taken steps throughout their career to maintain relevancy. So that's continuing training and education. They've got multiple certifications, and they're not from 30 years ago. They're from, you know, the last 5 years. You know, the ones that were in software and did waterfall, and then all of a sudden they saw Agile come through. They were the first ones to get certified for Agile. And when the next one that replaces Agile, because that'll come one of these days, happens, they're going to be the first ones to do that. So they're really early adopters of these market trends and picking ones, because I have some where clients will learn to code, but coding isn't part of what they need to do. The ones that are very relevant to what they want to do long term and have application to where their role is going in the shifts in the industry. They maintain and grow their networks. They continue reaching out to people and establishing real, genuine connections where they help others and others help them. And then pursuing opportunities like speaking or writing or webinars or whatever it is to establish themselves as a thought leader or a subject matter expert. That really does help them throughout their career, and they're not struggling now. They're just determining their next opportunity, not looking for it.
Great, thank you. Just want to address a couple of questions. This person is asking about oil and gas and going from that, transferring to a different industry, and there's a significant salary average or a change in salary, and how do they know what that industry salary would be? Salary.com is a great website. You can run, I haven't run out of searches. I've used a lot of different searches, and they've all been free, so you can use that. And then Indeed, go to Indeed, and I believe it's at the bottom of the website. I don't have it open right now. There's also a salary tool, and it'll show you what jobs for that type of role are paying. So those are two sources that are free that you can go to and use to get an idea of that. Another question, you've only worked at one company for the last 18 years. What do you put on your resume? First of all, congratulations on your tenure. That's amazing. So 18 years at one company. You know, it depends on the role, it depends what you've been doing. But I'd say if you're trying to show progression, then put the different roles that you've been in to show that you've been in a company for 18 years, but you haven't been stagnant. You've been doing different things. And if you have different titles, put those different titles on your resume and show how you've moved up in the company. All right. Let's keep going. We are moving right along. We got 15 minutes, so we're going to do our best. We may, like I said, we may run over a little bit. All right, tips for new grads. So the flip side of that. So we're going from older, more seasoned to new grads, entry-level job seekers. All right, Jessica, what advice would you have?
So this is such a tough time. It's an interesting time for graduates. They aren't even having graduation ceremonies, and internships have been installed. It's really, really interesting. I was telling Keith as we practiced, when I started out, one of my first jobs was really during the following 9/11. That's kind of when my career started. And then when I got married and moved to South Carolina, I literally started job hunting right during the Great Recession. So I, to some extent, know a little bit of what you're going through. And so will other people who have graduated at different times. The people who graduated when Harvey hit or when Sandy hit in New Jersey. Whatever the issue was, we're all kind of in that same boat. And graduates are going to face that on and off. So which it may take a little longer to find the right time. You may have to adjust your expectations, and hiring may be slower. But keep applying. Look at different alternate ways to get involved. Maybe it's a sideways job. I wanted to go into communications, so I actually took a job in marketing events and moved forward from there into communications because I got the relevant experience that I could use to jump, and then got a master's in communications later down the road when that became economically feasible. So always look for ways that you can slide sideways into what you want rather than the direct path if it's not available. Consider temporary, freelance, or relevant volunteer work, and we put relevant there because all volunteer work is worthy, but to really go on a resume and make an impact, you want it to be something that relates to the organization. So it may be like if the company is really into Habitat for Humanity, that would make an impact. Or if you were doing social media for Habitat for Humanity or whatever it is, and you wanted a social media role, then you would have direct experience to maintain skills and grow skills during this time. Check out sites like Virtual Vocations that specialize in remote roles, because they're going to help you find the opportunities to get started right away with remote work. And that's going to be with organizations that know how to run that, because it's going to be a long-term viable remote job. Continuing developing your relevant skills. Like I said, I got a master's later down the road, but you don't want to go into more debt. Everybody knows that. You've just gotten through college and don't necessarily have that monetary output. But things like learning new languages, whether that's a cultural language like Spanish or French or Chinese, or whether that's a programming language that would help you for the type of role you're going for. Look at those kind of opportunities. And then there's also like Coursera and some of those that have minimal cost training programs, and there's some free certification. Google AdWords is a free certification for people who might be interested in marketing, all of those kind of things. Look at those opportunities. And then YouTube, the ultimate self-tutorial website, YouTube has all sorts of things.
Let me just touch on that just real quick. A lot of the software companies now have their own training programs that they put out for free. So whether it's SalesLoft, Outreach, Salesforce, all these companies, Google, as you mentioned, they're hoping people use their software. You can just go directly to their website and look up how to use it. And it's all free because they want you to adopt their software. And so you don't even have to worry about going somewhere to pay. So those are all great skills to have, and employers really want that right now.
Yep. And we talked about dream employers earlier. Start reaching out to them to introduce yourself. They may not be hiring right now, but because they're not hiring, they're not getting a bunch of outreach, and they're not getting a bunch of resumes in. So it's a really good time, if they're not furloughed, and you can find that by looking them up in the news, to reach out to a hiring manager and say, hi, I just graduated, and this is my skill set, and this is what I'm really passionate about and really would love to learn more and grow with. And here's some activities, just a paragraph that introduces yourself and says, I know you're not hiring right now, but I'd love to talk to you and have an informational interview when you have time. And if you don't hear back, you don't hear back. But what if you do? It's never going to hurt you. Then brush up on those interviewing skills. And this is a tip for executive job seekers as well. It seems like it's easy to talk about yourself. This webinar, we've had 3 practice runs, because we wanted to make sure that we presented this information to you in the most helpful way, and you want to present your information to them in the most helpful way. This shows how you would be an add to their organization, not just a laundry list of what you've done. They could get that from your resume. So if that makes you nervous, or you're not quite sure how to do that, that's when things like career coaching really come in handy, because 1 or 2 interviewing sessions can really prepare you to be able to do that. And then finally, stay hopeful, keep applying, put one foot in front of the other. These kind of things will happen. There will be setbacks and roadblocks and stumbling blocks throughout your career. And just when you think everything's going great, it's not going to go great, because that's just the nature of life. And being able to roll with those and come out stronger is going to really benefit you in the long term of your career.
That's great. And Jessica, though, don't give away our secrets. We didn't practice at all. We just rolled out of bed and we started. We're true professionals. Okay. All right. How do I overcome gaps in my resume? Elizabeth, if you could take this one.
Sure. So speaking to gaps right now during COVID, I think a lot of hiring managers are going to be really cognizant of the fact that there are going to be layoffs and it's going to be tough to get people back to work quickly. So if it's a gap that's 4 months or less, you don't really need to overcome those. That's a typical job searching time. But if the gap is more than 10 years ago, leave it off the resume. You really only want the past 10 years of your experience in the resume anyway. Otherwise, when you're in front of your recruiter or the hiring manager, address the elephant in the room. And on your resume. So this is where a cover letter can really come into play. I have had candidates put in parentheses their reasons for leaving or why there's a gap, or, took care of family. And that's great too. It kind of helps me as a recruiter to see it quickly. When I submit, from a recruiter standpoint, when I submit candidates, I take those reasons off of the resume, because I'm able to speak to, in my note that I sent to the client, I'm able to address the gaps directly, but you know, if I'm just looking at a resume, then you want to kind of have those there. If it's something that's not easily explained, this is when you want to call Jessica at ResumeSpice, because she can really kind of help you craft your narrative. You know, because we all have gaps in our resume, and, you know, it's something that we all have to deal with and hiring managers are aware of.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. I've been in a couple of jobs for only a short period of time. Do I have to include them in my resume? Or how would you address?
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to that 4-month rule. So if they're all cover a span of less than 4 months and they're surrounding good tenure, and it was just, you know, you left a job and then you took a couple temporary jobs before you jump back into that, then your next job, probably not, but that's really where that 4-month rule does come into play. Because if it's a significant chunk of time, you do want to include it, because you're going to find yourself having to explain that gap. Or sometimes if I see a gap that's just, you know, 3 years, I might not even call. So, and if in those 3 years you were working for Murray Resources and temping here and there because, you know, it was during the recession, I always tell my candidates after they've worked 3 or 4 temporary assignments for us that they can actually put Murray Resources / contract work, and then, you know, that they did administrative, receptionist, stuff like that. So it shows that you've been keeping busy, you've been active on the job market. I mean, that being said, you know, hiring professionals understand that bad experiences happen, and they can happen more than once. So this goes back to working with a career coach if you need to, but I would definitely, it's definitely situational. But more often than not, I want to know why there is a gap. And that's one of the first questions I ask in an interview. And so you want to be ready to address that.
And that way you can address it with a hiring manager when it comes up, and be an advocate.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a question around salary questions during interviews, and we're not going to talk about this. So I thought I would just give my response here. This person had one where they were asked what they were making, but they were told that they can opt out of that question. So in certain states right now, you actually can't ask candidates what they currently make. Texas is not one of those states. So hiring managers, recruiters can't ask that. And recruiters ask it because we're asked by the hiring managers, by the companies, we're asked that information. So that's why we're asking, right? So they want to know. And we're not here to, on this call, to change the world. We're just here to tell you the reality of what we're working with. So you can always opt out. I mean, there's no requirement to tell people what you make. You don't have to. Like I said, in some states, they can't ask the question, but here they still can. But maybe one way to sort of get around this question, or at least to have it, to push it back in the process, is to say, you know, I'm very interested in this role. I'm sure that whatever salary is offered will be very fair and will line up with the expectations of the role, and just leave it open-ended. But at some point, you may not be able to get around it, but you can try to push off the question a little bit if you're concerned about it. Anything to add to that, Elizabeth or Jessica?
No, I agree. You know, I do have some pushback sometimes when I'm asking for salary. So and just remember, it is clients wanting to know, you know, if I'm presenting you at 60, but you last made 40, they're going to want to know why there's suddenly this $20,000 difference. And so when we ask you, it's really so that we can, you know, frame and advocate for you, why we should, you know, maybe you are at that point where you're in your career, you're ready for that next 5K step up. And so it's really so that we can kind of help tailor that response so that we can get you presented at, you know, the adequate salary range.
All right, thank you. Okay, how can you tell if a company is truly hiring or not? So many job listings are never applied to. And I think maybe that means reply to, but either way, I think we get the gist of it.
Okay, yeah. So really look at the recency of the listing. I said that earlier, but what happens is when a company does a requisition for a job, or they place it up, they get credits for however many months. So it might be up there for 60 days unless somebody actually takes it down. So sometimes you see roles that are over a month old, and they just let them naturally expire. It's not any intent on their part other than just hiring. There's a lot of different moving parts. And so they're trying to not have to move every single thing, and they know it's going to naturally expire at 60 days. And it could be something where they have a pipeline job where they fill it regularly. So if something looks like it's older, try to apply to stuff within the last few days or a week. Studies show that, like I said earlier, candidates that apply in, I think it's the first 3 days of the job listing, actually are more likely to get the interview and be offered the job because they're in that first set of resumes pulled. So that's your best bet. So don't wait. You're like, I saw a job listing and I want to go and have a resume company do my resume to apply for it now. Get the resume company to do your resume for the next job. Because right now you want to maximize your time to the best of your ability. If you see an older job that really looks interesting, reach out to somebody, find somebody in the company, call, whatever you need to do to say, hey, is that job still available? They'll tell you yes or no. And if they don't call you back and they're not available and they're not easy to get a hold of, might not be the best place to work anyway. So I would just go to the company that I can get a hold of and find out information from. Alternately, like I said, use LinkedIn to track down the company recruiter, the HR representative, or the department supervisor to say, hey, I'm interested in this role and I'd like to apply to it, and go ahead and send your materials. If it's a small business, go ahead and just send everything to somebody, because sometimes you can track down that particular email.
All right, perfect. Okay, so we technically only have a couple minutes left. We still got some slides to go through. So most of you are still with us. So as long as people are here, we're going to keep going. So like I said, feel free to drop off if you have to. We are going to make this available as a recording as long as it recorded correctly, which hopefully it does, but we're going to keep going. All right. Should job seekers adjust their salary expectations? We're just talking about salary. So Elizabeth, what's your take right now?
Yes, definitely. More than ever right now, flexibility is really key. Keep in mind that budgets have completely changed, and the companies who still have employees that are working, a lot of those employees have actually had to take 10 to 20% or even greater salary reductions. To use a real life example, before the pandemic, we were working on a requisition at a fairly high salary. The pandemic hit. They asked us to halt the search. They just reached out last week. They said, we're ready to go. However, we're having to pay substantially less. And it's only because of budget. And so just remember that it's not that, your merit isn't that, it's not your value. It's really bottom line. These businesses are now going to have to start running leaner, meaner, and really think about, the bottom line. So just focus on getting in the role, demonstrating your value. As things to pick back up, they're really going to notice those folks that, came in and showed, okay, this is what I can do. So yes, be very flexible right now with salary expectations.
Yeah. I mean, that's not an easy answer, but it's the truth right now. I mean, most of our clients, the folks who have not been laid off, they've taken those salary cuts. Mm-hmm. So the market is just adjusted, and it'll readjust the other way, but that's the market we're in right now.
Right.
All right. So let's keep going. Tips on how to network on LinkedIn. So Jessica is a LinkedIn expert. If you want to, definitely are. So give us some tips.
So first of all, networking is something you do now to help you 3 years from now. So I have people contact me and they say, how can I build my network? And I'm like, well, you can start now, but I can't give you results now. Your best step right now is to reach out to a human being within the hiring department of the role that you're interested in, and or the recruiter or the HR person for that particular role, and get to them. As far as networking with people, that is a two-way street. So sometimes people think about networking as what can I get from this, and what can I get from it long term. Think about what can I give long term. If there's nothing that you could benefit somebody and you're just in it to take back, benefit, that's a one-sided relationship. So it's just like a friendship. Your network connection needs to be somebody that you're willing to help in the long run, and they need to be willing to help you. So look for people who are active on the platform. The thing about LinkedIn is there's a good portion of people who just update a profile and never look at it again. Like I said, it may even be years out of date. So reaching out to them, people go, oh, well, I reached out to the hiring manager on LinkedIn and they never got back to me. Odds are the hiring manager very well could not be even checking their LinkedIn. So because I've worked with them, I've worked with the executives, and they don't always even look at it. They'll have like, they don't. So what you need to do is when you go onto their profile page, the ones that make their activity public, so you can see what their activity, if they're liking and commenting on posts, if they're actually posting of their own and writing articles and things like that and sharing things, those are the people that you want to establish connections with. And they're also the most likely to be able to, willing to connect with people that they don't necessarily know. So beyond, yes, connecting with everybody that you know within your network that you'd be willing to be a referral for, and that you think might give you a good referral, then the other option would be, sorry, the ResumeSpice line rung on me. So once you reach out to them, send a tailored message and let them know, hey, I'm interested in connecting. And that way you're not just out of the blue, and tell them why. So once you've reviewed their activity, you can say, hey, I've seen you've been posting on process improvement. I'm really interested in that. I think we have some shared interests, and I'd love to, connect and get to know you further. Just keep it professional, and that's all you have to do. And then just like and comment on their things regularly. That's how you grow your LinkedIn network. It's not just having a page just sitting there. That only helps when a recruiter wants to connect with you. But there's some research that shows the more active you are on the platform, the more likely you are to show up in search results by recruiters, because it's an active page. Also engage with the people, like and comment on what they say. And when I say professionally, that means that's not the time to disagree. Even if you disagree and you can disagree professionally, that's not necessarily a good look when you're trying to make a connection that can help you with your career. So unless you're qualifying or adding something that would be useful, or finding areas of mutual agreement, that would be what we would consider professional interaction with people that you want to be a network connection. And always, if you do disagree with somebody on the platform or do have something like that, you should always be respectful. You should never name call. Unfortunately, we see that very regularly on LinkedIn, and it can affect whether you get chosen for a job. And then as far as maintaining your network, all you have to do to maintain a network is very, very simple. Other than liking and commenting every once in a while, the 5 or 10 people that are really, you think could be the best resource to you, that you could also be a resource for, you just message them every once in a while, once a month, check in. Right now would be a good time to check in and see how people are doing. They would appreciate their outreach.
That's great. That's great. We have another question about LinkedIn. What about recommendations on LinkedIn? Do employers look at them? I say yes, they do look at them. I can't recall where there was something else that LinkedIn used to have that wasn't as helpful, but recommendations are looked at. And I would say if you've got 5,000 connections and no recommendations, that I'm not saying it's a red flag, but let's say you're in sales, there's nobody come on LinkedIn and taken the initiative to give you a recommendation. That could look a little bit strange. So, and there's nothing wrong with asking people for recommendations, and you should. People that you either currently work with or worked with in the past, ask them to give you a recommendation on LinkedIn. They make it really easy to do that. So I would say yes, do that. There's some questions around interviewing tips. I'm just going to put a plug in, FAQs for interview questions, things like that. ResumeSpice and Murray Resources both have very robust blogs, and we talk about this stuff all the time. So go to murrayresources.com, go to the blog, read those tips. Same thing with ResumeSpice. We do interview preparation. That's part of the service that we offer. So we talk about it all the time. There's lots of free materials on our website. So go check those out if you have a chance. All right. Yeah. So what are some resume tips? We'll save one of the most important questions for here. So folks who have hung on this long, and most of you are still there, Jessica, what are some resume tips?
Sure. So this could be a whole webinar in and of itself, but just kind of a quick and dirty overview. It says, you have 6 seconds. And I know you've probably heard that, or many of you have probably heard that. It is the absolute truth. And there is nothing nefarious about it, because I think some people say that they find that insulting. It's not that nobody ever reviews your resume carefully. It's that when I, as a hiring manager, was receiving 50 to 100 resumes for a job, I had to be able to quickly review those. Recruiters, on the other hand, and internal or external, may be reviewing 1,000. So they have to be able to quickly scan. So I always laughed and I said, I had the top file of resumes, the second file of resumes, which was the OK candidates, and I had the round file. And the round file would be the trash can. So your whole goal is to be in one of those top 2 piles of candidates, and ideally that first pile. So in that 6 seconds, that's what we're doing. We're saying, okay, this is a great candidate. This is an okay candidate. This is not going to match. This is a great candidate. Okay candidate. Great candidate. Not going to match. And then those great candidates, they get reread. We look at those and we're like, ooh, this person really does have what we need. And this person really is. And that's a common, Liz is nodding. Liz will tell you the same thing. That's just what hiring managers, recruiters, and HR people, all of us, have to learn to do to be able to quickly parse out who is a good candidate, which is why your resume needs to be less is more. You don't ever need a 7 to 15 page resume. And we see those regularly, and that's one of the things we work at ResumeSpice. It needs to be a couple of pages, 3 pages ish max. And unless the younger, the newer candidate you are, you probably only need 1 page. So it needs to be clean, clear, simple. The things that the job requirement is calling out for, and that your type of role calls out for, those need to scream off the page with some metrics about how you did them well. Bullet the accomplishments. We went to this really highly stylized resume, like in the early mid 2000s when Microsoft Word developed all those templates. Ignore every one of the templates unless it's a very simple bulleted format. No text boxes, those don't get imported. Headers and footers don't get imported. Colored fonts may not get read correctly. I've had clients that were submitting things with their contact information in a text box, which means it was not even getting imported. So they were just getting things without titles or information on them. Charts, those kind of things, we don't care about charts. We just want to look at what you did, who you did it with, and how you did it very well, and during what time frame. If you've got those, and then your contact information. If you've got those on your resume, the content is key there. Standard normal sized font. It doesn't need to be 14-point font, and please don't make it 6-point font. I've had clients try to cram like 15 years of experience onto a page by making it 6-point font. That 1-page thing is an arbitrary rule. You don't have to do that. And they were doing themselves a disservice. So it was really nice to be able to help them present their experience in a much more strong way, simply by making it where it was readable. So typical rule of thumb would be 10 to 11-point font, because some fonts are naturally bigger than others. So for like a Times New Roman, that would be 11. For an Arial, that would be a 10. Watch your tenses. Current roles should be in current tense. Past roles should be in past tense. A trick that confuses some candidates and some job seekers is you can mix current and past tense on your present role. And the way you do that is if you're presently doing it, or it's a responsibility that's ongoing that you'll continue to do, then you would keep that in the current tense. But if it's an achievement that has done and over with, then you would put that in the past tense and put the metrics about how it was successful. A quick tip, the past tense of lead is led, so which is LED. So a lot of times we see candidates spell led like they led an initiative as LEAD. And that's the weight. You're weighing something down. So unless you want to intimate that you're weighing down the efforts of your team, then LED for past tense led. And it is a very common error. Use strong action verbs. You generated, you grew, you expanded, you lead, you drive, you spearhead, you manage, you oversee, you transform, whatever that looks like. The higher level that you are, manage is a very hands-on function. So you can manage something. That's when you are hands-on, daily in the weeds on the managing something. As you move into strategic leadership roles, your resume needs to actually reflect that. So it's more of overseeing and steering and guiding and shaping and transforming. Those are where you see those kind of changes. So you can very much indicate your level just through the verbs that you use for what you did. As far as the no's, the do not do's, no typos. I can tell you, if your resume has a typo, you'll still get the interview. 9 times out of 10, a typo is not going to stop you. I've seen high-level executive resumes that have a typo in them, and they've gotten roles with that job. But if it's all throughout, and you have multiple typos and really bad ones, I've seen managers spelt manger, things like that. That will get you excluded because they want somebody that knows how to present themselves professionally. Fancy fonts. I had a client, she wasn't a client. I had a job seeker contact me one time for a review, and her name was in pirate font. So unless you're Johnny Depp, your name doesn't need to be in pirate font. It needs to be in a standard professional font. Pictures and address, especially this is especially directed to our our candidates and job seekers from other countries. It's very common to include things like marital status, full address, children, religion, birth date, and pictures. None of that. In America, in Canada, in a lot of the Western hiring environments, but especially the U.S. No pictures, no address, and no personal information. We want to know strictly professional information. And then also things like vague language and jargon can really be off-putting to somebody reviewing your resume. So right now, I'm actually working with a candidate whose resume, you couldn't tell what the person did because it was so vague, because they wanted, to be open for multiple types of opportunities. And I think somebody asked that earlier, how do you show your ability to be in multiple types of opportunities? Well, if you take out everything that you do and just talk about it in vague terms, then you wind up in this limbo and nobody knows where to place you. And if you are out of place, you can't find a home. So you need to make sure that your resume is specific to what you did. Now, one caveat to that is if you are in food manufacturing and you want to go into, manufacturing a hands-on product, and you're going to be overseeing a warehouse, you don't necessarily have to put you were in food manufacturing if you're trying to go, expand your horizons, because it's very much a like versus like environment. So you're still managing the health, safety, environmental operations of the factory, and that's what you want to focus on. But you're still being very specific in your warehouse factory management role, leading teams of 100 to have operational excellence. That's how you can be specific without having to pigeonhole yourself in an industry. And then also minimize jargon. Keywords are important, but they need to be surrounded by context, which is what you did, how you did it, and your particular approach. If you just keyword stuff, it comes across. Also, things like HSSE, health, safety, and environmental, HSE, health, safety, and environmental. Those might be well known in your field, but if you're looking outside your field, it may not be well known. So think about your audience. An HR person may not know very specific acronyms, while a hiring manager may. So I would scrub it of those and spell out anything that's not commonly known, like ROI for return on investment, or CEO for chief executive officer, those kind of things that people just know. Those are fine to keep.
Wow, that could be a whole webinar. So much on this topic. I'm just going to address a couple questions related to the resumes. One person asked, does this mean we have to switch to a functional resume format versus chronological format? I'm going to answer that one because I feel very passionate about this. Do not use a functional resume. You're not fooling anyone, right? So hiring managers, HR folks, they all look at a functional resume as though somebody's trying to hide some information, hide dates, hide career gaps. It's not doing you, whoever came up with this format to try to hide gaps is just doing folks a disservice. So please, we have blog posts just on this particular question. So please use a chronological format. It's better to show a gap and address it than it is to try to hide it. One person asked if we're paid by LinkedIn because we're talking about LinkedIn so much. That's a real easy answer. I wish we were paid by LinkedIn. It's the opposite. We pay LinkedIn a lot to use their tool as recruiters. So no, recruiters and all hiring managers at this point, LinkedIn is just part of our tool. It's one of many tools that we use, but no, it's the other way around. We pay for the privilege of using LinkedIn. All right, let's keep going. We really don't have time to go into this. Let me just say, ResumeSpice.com. If you want to go and look at samples, this is what a sample resume would look like on our site. So just go to the ResumeSpice.com website and you'll look at entry-level examples, professional examples, executive examples. We have those laid out. So hopefully that is helpful. This was a real candidate. The names changed and the companies are changed, but this person, and some of the information has changed, but this person used our executive resume service and got the role. So should I change my resume for every position that I apply for? Should it just be one page? We sort of talked about the first part. Let's talk about, we actually talked about both of these, but Jessica, if you just want to address these real quick, that'd be great.
This is an easy one. Yes, you should take 10 to 15 minutes to tailor. Now, if you find if you're in sales and you have some very, very specific skills that are going to be used for every single role, you have less tailoring to do than if you're looking for like a role as content manager or a marketing manager and you have different focuses. So it really just depends, but 10 to 15 minutes is a good rule for the roles that you really want to make sure that you're tailoring for those. As far as the resume link, whoever came up with that one-page resume thing, that is a bunch of bull. It never existed. It is not a thing. You will find a hiring manager here or there that's like, I won't look at it if it's more than one page. Ignore them. You don't want to work for them anyway. So anyway, for new graduates, one page. That is pretty much a hard and fast rule. You do not have more than a page worth of information unless you're just trying to find stuff. And now you may have done some graduate work and things out of your graduate work, but even then, the hiring managers aren't wanting a detailed list of everything you did with your graduate work because it just shows you can be taught and that you have a higher level of knowledge coming in. They just want to say that you did it. So just include your dissertation or whatever. You don't have to include the abstract of the dissertation. 2 to 5 years, 1 to 2 pages, 6 to 10 years, 2 pages, over 10 years, 2 to 3 pages. That is a general rule. I have worked with 25-year executives that had an amazing one-page resume because that's all you needed to show the stuff that they had done because it was just so big. You just put it on a page and you said, here it is. And also it was supporting them more than getting them in the door. And then again, I've worked with 5-year technology programmers and things like that needed a 3-page resume because of the amount of technical expertise that they had, that we had to put all the certifications and all that. You don't want to cut out experience just to put in certifications. So if you need a separate page for those, for certifications, publications, all those things, don't worry about that. 2 pages, when we say 2 pages of experience, 2 pages for your experience. The additional things, you could have a portfolio on another page, etc.
All right, let me clear up a question that we had. So somebody's asking if they're looking for someone who is near in vicinity, should they not know your address on the resume? They just need to know the city and state, right? And zip. And zip.
Zip code, yes. Yeah. We do a lot of
city, state, and zip. So they don't need to know your actual street address, the number. So you don't need to put that on, but yes, the city, state, and zip. And somebody else asked a question, if you put somebody else's address, let's say you are moving to Austin and you know you're moving to Austin and your mom lives in Austin and you put your mom's address, well, what do they want to see you? I mean, it should be somewhere, if you're going to put an address, it has to be somewhere that you can be very quickly, right? You got to be able to get to Austin the next day and you are going to move there for sure. We're not trying to, trick anyone that I'm in an area, we're saying I'm in an area when I'm not. I'm only going to be able to make it there in a couple of weeks. If you're for sure moving to Austin, put the address or put the city, state, and zip, and then make sure you can get there as soon as possible for the interview if it's going to be an in-person.
And I think like people get really nervous when they get the job. Oh my gosh, I have to be immediately available. You can ask for 2 days. So if they contact you on a Thursday, it's perfectly acceptable to say I'm available to interview on Monday, and then that gives you the weekend. Or if they call you on Monday, it's perfectly acceptable to say I'll be there on Wednesday. So maybe you have to pay extra for the plane ticket, but you can get in there and have time to get prepared and do what you need to do.
Right.
Perfect. Okay. Let's keep going. Okay. Should I use a cover letter? What are some tips? So Jessica, give us some tips on this.
Yes, you should always use a cover letter. So when they do research, a lot of times you hear it's about a 50-50 split. So so 50% may not read or may not expect it, but 50% who do read it are going to be more swayed by the fact that you have it. Recruiters are less likely to be the people who are, oh my goodness, I need a cover letter. That's really for the hiring manager. So make sure that, that when you put it together, you need to address the hiring manager's name. Always, not the recruiter, the hiring manager. Look on LinkedIn, find out who the hiring manager would be and do that. So what I always say is a well-written cover. Now, if it's poorly written, if you need to make sure it's written well because it could keep you from getting the interview. But a well-written cover letter will never hurt you, but it could help you. So you can put hiring managers. Nobody's really, going nuts about whether you have your name on it or not, but it's a nice touch. And for the hiring manager to see their name on it, it's an immediate boost. It's about the company. What can you do for the company? So a lot of times I get people that they've sent me one that they've written, and it's like, I have this and I have that and I'm this and I'm looking for this and that is great. You have needs that need to be met. But as a hiring manager, they're reading it exactly like you just wrote it. What I have needs that are needed to be met. So how can you meet their needs and grow long-term within the company and provide value? So think about that. And in the interview is where you start talking about some of the needs that you have and making sure they're a match. But at first, you want to show them what you can add for them. Express your excitement and passion and include your contact information, and then customize. You can have a base cover letter, which is kind of like what we build for clients if we're not doing a very specific role. And what they can do is go and look at some of the specifics, like the areas of focus or the actual introduction, to really tailor it to that company. I see that you are expanding to 3 different states. In my past roles, I've really helped with expanding company presence and market presence, and this is how I did it. A couple of examples. Would love to talk to you about it. And that transforms a basic cover letter, because you're going to be wanting to do things where you do growth and expansion anyway, and transforms it into a tailored outreach. And then, if you were referred to the role, you can indicate that you were referred to the role, and that's going to be something where you attach it to somebody that might be some way to get you into the interview a little faster.
Yeah, we find that it's always helpful. There's someone in the company who referred you. If you can put their name, then somebody can walk down the hall or give them a call and talk about you. It's just a way to separate you. Not everybody's going to have that, but if you have that, I'm surprised by how many people don't mention that when they have a referral.
Right.
All right. Jessica, again, so what are some online resources besides LinkedIn for professional athletes?
Quite literally 800 million of them. I think that was the last figure I saw. Career Builder, Ladders, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, Glassdoor, Monsters. There's industry specific ones like DICE for IT or AMA, job boards for marketing. Your professional organizations will have one, SHRM for HR. Also, a really, really good source is your collegiate alumni job boards. Also, you can use Google. If you're not married to one different site, the way that I work when I work with clients to help them narrow down searches is I'll look in their area just in Google, and it aggregates from all the different sites. So sometimes you get some of the job specific sites like the government sites and things that you wouldn't necessarily know to search for on your own just by searching the type of title. So I might say sales manager job Houston, and it'll aggregate, and I can view each job, and then there's employer list on the left that I can tailor for location and date posted, and all of those good filters.
So let's just pull up what you're talking about on Google. So if you just walk us through this.
So this is sales job Houston. You could also say sales manager job. The more specific you are, the less results you'll get, but the more focused results you'll get. So this is kind of a big compilation. So sales rep, Amazon's looking for an enterprise sales rep. You'll see they posted 6 days ago, so it's a pretty recent role. Then there's a virtual sales for MGN Houston. That's over a month ago, and so that may not be an active role anymore. So I would actually reach out to somebody before I applied, but I would have no hesitation applying to Amazon enterprise sales representative right now, because they're an essential business and they are absolutely hiring for that role.
Yeah, and this is what you're talking about, where you could filter up here, category, title, location, so on, which is great.
And then also you can do the job alerts up at the top so that Google alerts you every day or every week, I think, for the
set it up.
Things.
Yeah, you can set it up by almost any filter. So if you want to wake up in the morning and get alerts when certain jobs have posted, you can do that. You don't have to just manually check Google every day. And something else, speaking of Google, so, a lot of us may we all go to Google really every day, but, you may look at the results and say, well, I never click on the ads. I would look at these ads right now. So let's just say you've punched in, you're doing a search for Houston sales jobs. Well, this company right here has paid an ad in this environment right now to find people. And there's LinkedIn, and they're everywhere. And then here's Wells Fargo. They are paying to find folks. So, when you're talking about people who have a job opening right now, they're not posting, they're keeping an eye on their ad dollars right now. And if they don't have an opening right now, they're not posting these ads. So you will see that just like any other search on Google. Go to the top, look at who's hiring for a certain type of role, and apply if it's a good fit for you. All right. So speaking of companies that are hiring right now, Elizabeth, as a recruiter, what are you seeing?
We're seeing a lot of essential employers still hiring. That can include, especially in Houston, a lot of oil and gas companies are kind of starting to ramp back up. Gig and delivery, so Faber, Uber Eats, look at that. That's just kind of in between. Grocery stores, and I'm not just talking grocery stores like Checker, but we had a large grocery store distribution. So they're doing like the picking and the packing because, when we were going through the stay-at-home order, specifically here in Houston, it was a lot of curbside pickup. And so they're having to make sure their warehouses were stocked. Technology, utilities, healthcare, and finance, we're starting to see some of those pick back up as well. And so I think just kind of keeping the news on, that's really kind of telling us what's coming through.
Yeah, and if you want to just look at a list of the types of companies that are hiring, you can Google essential employers, Harris County, and they actually put out a list. This is when they were telling companies who can open and who couldn't. So most companies at this point, most companies are open in some way. They're either working remotely or folks are in the office, and more are coming back to the office. But the essential employers are more likely to be those who have to be working. They have essential services. They are hiring. So I don't have the link handy right now, but if you Google essential employers, Harris County, essential employers, Texas, you will come upon those companies that are doing that. All right, and we're just about done. So here's some additional sources. We have some links to our own jobs. So open jobs, jobs.murrayresources.com. This is all real time. So if we're working on a job, it is here. So if you call us and ask us what jobs we have, we can tell you over the phone, but you can also just in your pajamas and every day, just check the open jobs there. Sample resumes, we've got a ton. We talked about that. You can go to our website, ResumeSpice.com. You can check those out. Tons of free tips on resumes, LinkedIn, cover letters, everything we talked about today. We write a lot of information about, and so you can look at that. And then if you're the type of person who likes visual information, we've actually recorded some videos for folks who were kind enough to let us use their resumes as guinea pigs. They sent us their resumes and they said, you can put them up on YouTube and give me feedback to it. And the only criteria for that is that they were okay for us sharing that with everybody. So this is not a very easy link to follow, but if you go to YouTube and punch in ResumeSpice, you will get to it. All right, so we are gonna answer. We've got 60 plus questions. There's no way we can get to all of them, and I can't do that to Jessica and Elizabeth today, but let's see how many we can continue to answer here. Let's see.
Keith, I see one on the zip code that I'd like to quickly answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
If that's okay.
Then I've got one.
Okay, so somebody asked, Luis asked, why zip? Why put in your zip code? Could you put in Greater Houston, Texas if you live in Katy? The reason they say zip is because the recruiters actually are looking. So if you're uploaded in Indeed or in LinkedIn, what they're going to do is they're going to look for roles within like a 30-mile radius of the zip code of the company because of they want candidates to live in the area typically. So they'll use that zip code. So if you're looking within your area, and within that 30 miles, you can put Greater Houston area and then just put your Katy zip. That's fine. That's the key. And then the other thing is they do want to see where somebody is from. So when you start leaving out things, it looks like there's some intentional reason you're just leaving things out. And so they like to have all the information presented to them, just like you would, so you can make an informed decision.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks for answering that. We have another question about, I was laid off due to COVID. Is it best practice to update my status on LinkedIn as looking for opportunities? Or does that look like a negative to potential employers in that I'm not currently employed? Jessica, what's your thought on that? And Elizabeth, if you want to weigh in as well.
I don't like to put currently seeking opportunities simply because it's a vague thing. What I would say is you can put that the role ended because it did, and you can put why if you want to, but I think it's pretty evident at this point in time if anybody who had their role end in the last 2 or 3 months, most people will know why. But if you want to put in your summary, after your summary, you can put a statement of currently seeking roles in this type, these 2 or 3 titles. Now LinkedIn allows you to do that with the recruiter outreach as well. So you don't have to make it public if you don't want to. But it certainly, it doesn't hurt, you know, to say that you're currently seeking.
Yeah, and just keep in mind, real quick, and then I'll get to you, Elizabeth, but on the title itself, if you put seeking opportunities, that is your title, right? That's your space to put, you know, I'm a marketing manager.
I would not put it there. Yeah.
Right. So just keep that in mind. If that's what a recruiter is going to see first, looking for opportunities, but they have no context of, you know, your industry or your function. So sorry, Elizabeth.
No. Well, to kind of just piggyback on what Jessica said, not having it as your title, but there should be a filter in LinkedIn now where you can choose for it to show up in searches. So I know that I run searches, and LinkedIn gives me the option for candidates that have clicked the filter of tell recruiters that I'm looking now. And that does minimize how many responses I get, but I know that those candidates are those that are more than likely going to respond to me. So you want to make sure you have that filter checked off.
Perfect. All right. What kind of follow-up is appropriate if you're in the middle of the interview process and the employer just shut down temporarily? How often, as a recruiter, Elizabeth, would you say somebody should be reaching out?
If they're in the middle of the interview process?
Well, I just say in general, this is a pretty specific question, but let's just say they're in the process with an employer or they're in the process with a recruiter and they haven't heard anything. How often?
Sure. I think once a week. I would maybe start, that could be part of your checklist that you put together that you're doing every week. Once a week, reach out to your recruiter. Hey, this is Elizabeth, just wanted to check in. I haven't heard from you on ABC position. I think once a week, you know, and remember to also give your recruiter or the hiring manager some grace. And, you know, suddenly we find ourselves working from home and being kindergarten, first grade, third grade teachers. And so just the same way we're kind of, you know, asking for grace, remember to give that back.
Perfect. I think we've gotten to most of them. I mean, a lot of the questions have been answered, and I know folks joined at different periods. So I would go back and just look at the webinar, and you may have missed it. People are asking about career gaps and if they're a more seasoned candidate, and those things were addressed. Frequent job changes. So a lot of that stuff was already addressed earlier, and I don't want to repeat for the folks who have been here. I think, let me just answer one more because I see it's a little bit of a unique question. If they're coming from another country and somebody has experience, they've only been in this country a couple of years, should they include the experience from their previous country? And I would say yes, right? Otherwise, you're going to look like an entry level. There's nothing wrong with that, but you're going to look like an entry level candidate when you're not. You're going to have a lot of relevant experience. It just happens to be in a different country. So yes, do include that. Okay, well, with that, our 60 minutes was actually 94 minutes. So for that, I apologize, but a huge thank you to Jessica and Elizabeth. I really appreciate them doing this. I asked them to do this for me, and they both agreed to. And then next thing you know, we had 500 people. And I think, you know, it was a lot to ask for them. They did a lot of preparation. So both of you, awesome job. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody who joined. We will be making the slides available as well as a recording. So hopefully this was helpful. And if we get good feedback to it, and maybe we'll do another one. We'll get specific about resumes or LinkedIn cover letters. We'll go into a little bit more detail. So thanks so much. Thanks for